1986, a cold and rainy November night on the south side of Chicago. Willie Flukey Stokes, the biggest drug dealer in the Windy City, is ambushed on 79th Street near Calumet Ave. He and his bodyguard are murdered by unknown assailants.
Flukey Stokes' violent death was consistent with a life full of corruption, dope dealing, and murder. Flukey wanted people to believe his diamonds, cars, and cash came from Lady Luck.
I'm a gambler. I shoot pool, dice.
Flukey Stokes was on the short list of most successful black gangsters, not just in Chicago history, but in American history. By 1986, he had successfully dodged several murder charges, and he dominated the Windy City's drug business. Today, the Flukey Stokes story has a fresh perspective from 30 years of new information. It's a dark and complicated story of hitmen turned informants, informants turned rapists, bodyguards turned assassins, a dead kingpin, and extreme police corruption. Flukey Stokes' ghost haunted Chicago for decades after his death. At the center of the corruption is not Flukey Stokes himself, but the Chicago Police and Cook County Prosecutor's Office.
Unit 5 has learned that Flukey's drug empire was making more money than anyone ever imagined. Authorities now believe his empire was grossing $1 million a week. That's more than $50 million a year. Confidential federal drug enforcement documents obtained by Unit 5 reveal how big Flukey's organization was. Flukey was trying to hire hitman James Allen as an enforcer to protect his drug organization. At that time, according to DEA documents, Flukey showed him 22 kilos of heroin worth more than $60 million. That was at just one stash house. Flukey had an endless supply of cocaine and heroin, and he established a drug messenger service consisting of 30 to 50 runners who could deliver his drugs anywhere in the city 24 hours a day. Flukey gave his runners only 2 ounces of dope at any time. Flukey limited the amount of dope he had on the street for a number of reasons. First, he could limit his losses if any of his runners got caught by the police, and he could keep better track of his dope supply if he gave everyone the same amount. And finally, he wouldn't give anyone any more dope until they paid for the dope they already sold. Flukey never handled the dope, he handled the money. Here at 121 East 47th Street, Flukey set up office and counted his dope money, which was brought to him in gym bags, briefcases, and paper sacks. For example, Unit 5 has learned that on October 23rd, he counted as much as $200,000. On October 28th, he counted $60,000 from just one money runner, and on November 1st, 3 runners gave Flukey money. One of the bags contained $40,000. This man, Big Bill Hill, was Flukey's right-hand man. Pictured here in better days, his fingers were covered with diamonds and his hands stuffed with cash. On October 5th, 1983, he was caught with 134 packets of cocaine and heroin. Until he was put out of business, prosecutors say he alone made $100,000 a week for Flukey's organization.
The money just rolled into Big Bill from the street people, who in turn rolled it into Flukey's pockets.
Flukey Stokes was arrested over 70 times, but somehow only served a single year in prison.
Charges range from drug violations to murder. But since 1978, Flukey's life in crime seemed to come to a halt, even though his drug business was more profitable than ever.
Apparently, Flukey had a long list of friends in the Chicago Police Department.
Unit 5 has learned while some police officers were working hard trying to put Flukey behind bars, others were on his payroll, secretly feeding him police reports and other inside information. It was after the funeral of Flukey's son, Willie the Wimp, that police got the surprising news. Flukey's informers penetrated the police department's detective division at Area 1. Stokes had been stopped by Las Vegas police while on a gambling junket at Caesar's Palace. He was caught with Chicago police mugshots of the suspects in his son's murder. Police tell Unit 5 it was not uncommon for Flukey to have stacks of confidential police reports.
On raids or when search warrants were executed in the past, it would not be unusual to find police reports in Flukey's possession.
Did that surprise you as a prosecutor?
Well, Flukey would have no real good reason to have police reports unless he's trying to take care of his people.
Drug investigators from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, through an undercover informant, learned that Flukey had a lot of friends on the police department. Flukey would often spot police officers on the street and tell his bodyguards not to worry because, quote, they're my friends. Flukey suggested that if the police department had special details working late at night, he knew when they were out, where they were working, and who they were. Knowing that kind of information enabled Flukey to stay away from the police and to keep his empire operating without interference.
He attempted to pay off police officers for police reports, and we believe other things. We believe he was making an attempt to own the entire Chicago Police Department.
In 1985, he was convicted of bribery for offering police $10,000 in exchange for reports naming the sole witness in another murder case, and was free on appeal bond when he was killed.
We think he did do anything to protect his empire. We think that he made his money dealing in drugs. We think he protected his interests any way he had to, and if it led to murder, so be it.
2 years before his own murder, Stokes was accused of having a pharmacist, himself suspected of supplying heroin cutting agents, murdered. That murder remained unsolved for more than a year until Darrell Moore, a convicted rapist, told detectives that he had helped arrange the pharmacist's death for Stokes and other dealers. Prosecutors thought they finally had Flukey, but their murder case against him unraveled. As the only witnesses against him, a trio of self-described hitmen, recanted their testimony.
When Willie Flukey Stokes was buried, the head of the largest single independent drug operation in Chicago history was laid to rest. But the body of his drug empire is still alive and thriving and in turmoil. There appears to be three groups muscling for control of Flukey's $50 million a year drug network. One group is headed by Gordon Battle, Flukey's former partner, another by Chuck McFerrin, Flukey's archenemy, and the third by Sam Love Jr., Flukey's former associate. The struggle for control of Flukey's well-entrenched drug turf started, and members of Flukey's organization were brutally gunned down. Narcotics investigator Tom Shinnick.
And they're vicious and violent enough that they would protect themselves at all costs.
Unit 5 has learned that shortly before Flukey was murdered, a new cartel of independent drug dealers was formed, and he began to fear a major drug war was imminent. On November 10th at this restaurant, Flukey met with this man, Chuck McFerrin. Police theorized that McFerrin is the self-appointed leader of the new cartel. Also at that meeting, Pedro Rodriguez, a man police consider to be a major supplier of cocaine and heroin to Chicago drug dealers. Rodriguez, believed to have organized crime connections in New York, Detroit, and South Florida, may have made a pact to deal only with the new cartel. The cartel is expected to take any action to gain control of Flukey's lucrative drug empire. And the big question is, how much is Gordon Battle willing to give up? Battle, known as Chip on the Street, is Flukey's heir apparent. Battle lives in a fortress-like house on the far south side of the city. He was Flukey's partner for the last few years. Another group police believe could emerge as a major source of drugs is the Love family. Police discovered evidence of the Love's big-time drug business on January 19th, when narcotics agents raided this Alsop apartment house and confiscated more than $500,000 in drug money. The cash, in mostly 10s and 20s, belongs to Sam Love Jr.
Turns out that Flukey's murder was a lot more complicated than first appeared. There was more to it than merely one drug dealer bumping off another. In the beginning, the police's chief suspect was Charles Edward Bay, co-founder of the Black Peastone Street Gang. Bay had worked for Stokes as an enforcer until late 1984, when he and others had started their own drug operation. Apparently, Bay and Flukey's business had become mutually exclusive after at least 20 shots were fired from an Uzi at Bay and fellow gang leader Charles Highsmith in an alley behind South Michigan Avenue. In the end, it turned out that Flukey's own bodyguard, Earl Wilson, who claimed to have jumped out of his car and fired at Stokes' killers on the night of the murder, was eventually convicted for killing Flukey and his driver. He was the one who set them up to be murdered on that November night in 1986. Police claim they broke the case when a mysterious man came forward and told them he'd overheard Earl Wilson talking to the assassins on a two-way radio moments before Flukey was killed. In another strange twist, never really explained by the police or prosecutors, it came out that Flukey's bodyguard, Earl Wilson, was also the chief informant in the Stokes operation at the very moment he led his boss into the death trap waiting for him. So one set of police officers greedily lined their pockets with Stokes' drug cash, while another set of police and prosecutors empowered snitches to run amok in exchange for increasingly dubious information about Stokes and other major drug dealers they were desperate to bring down. Maybe the crooked cops and the legitimate ones got together and cleaned house in one fell swoop. Who knows? The epilogue of the Flukey Stokes case is the Chicago police torture scandal, which had been brewing for more than a decade and finally culminated with the conviction of John Burge, a police commander in charge of investigating violent crimes on the South Side during the age of Flukey Stokes.
I had never known what it was like to have a shotgun placed in your mouth, and you got 3 white detectives saying, "Nigga, you gonna tell me what I want to hear?" And when I mumble the words no, one of them would say, "Blow that nigga's head off."
He just told me I was gonna tell you. He said, "Nigga, you gonna tell you? You can tell me what I want to know."
And after these wires were then hooked up to your handcuffs, and he asked you again about the murder, what happened?
He didn't ask me right then. He took that, they put the electricity through me. I bit through. He told me I bent my back through the bag. I bit through the bag. He put another bag on top of my head, and he put the electricity to me.
Can you tell me who it was that put a plastic bag over your head?
Burge.
Early in 1982, did you participate in the electric shock and threatening with the gun and using racial epithets against a suspect by the name of Melvin Jones in Area 2?
I'll adapt my initial response as the answer.
And do you take the fifth on that?
Yes.
And did you use a black box, a similar or the same electrical device that you had used in previous occasions at Area 2 on Andrew Wilson in order to interrogate him and to get a statement from him?
I'll adapt my initial response as the answer.
And you take the fifth on that?
Yes.
I sat in a prison cell and I prayed for this day.
Former Chicago Police Lieutenant John Burge is found guilty of lying about the torture of suspects. For decades, dozens of suspects, most of them black, have accused Burge and his officers of torturing them into confessing to crimes ranging from armed robbery to murder.